or national insurance. The Labour leader put economic growth and stability at the core of his party's plan, promising to end what he called a desperate era of gestures and gimmicks. Back on the campaign trail in Crewe, he rejected Rishi Sunak's suggestion of higher taxes and said Britain will do better under Labour.
It is a manifesto that rejects fundamentally the proposition that Britain can't do better than this, that we have to go on in the way we've been going on in the last 14 years. It is a rejection of that. Britain can do better, Britain will do better, and with our manifesto and a mandate for a Labour government, we will take our country forward, and that will be felt in every community across the country.
Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, said Labour's numbers would mean higher taxes.
This is Labour's tax trap manifesto. It only contains tax rises, no tax cuts. Under Labour's own published figures, it will take the tax burden to levels never seen before in this country. And that doesn't even include the £2,000 of taxes which they're going to levy on every working family across the country. So it's not actually so much what is in this manifesto, it's what's not in this manifesto, because Labour have not ruled out taxing your home, your car, your pension. Everyone at home needs to be very, very clear. Their taxes will rise under Labour.
The Liberal Democrats described Labour's manifesto as a gamble on economic growth that fails to set out how wealth will be shared more evenly. Sir Ed Davey joined his party's candidate for Tunbridge Wells, Mike Martin, at an obstacle course this afternoon. He said that trickle-down economics will not fix broken Britain.
They're suggesting £9 billion of investment to rescue our NHS, and we're talking about investment to help the poorest in our society. And we want to make sure that we've got the capital investment, in social homes, in the fight against climate change, and making sure the nature crisis is dealt with. So we have an ambitious policy package in the Liberal Democrats, and on top of that, we're the only party saying we need to reform our politics.
International news. All G7 countries have agreed to continue funding a loan package for Ukraine worth nearly £40 billion. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the funds would be backed by proceeds from immobilised Russian assets. Rishi Sunak held a bilateral meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky today that's said to have lasted for 10 minutes. That, of course, being the Ukrainian President. He vows to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine in its fight for freedom. He's called the funding package game-changing. US President Joe Biden is also urging fellow members to support ceasefire negotiations in Gaza and encourage the Hamas terror group to accept a proposal backed by Israel. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Camilla.
Thanks, Tatiana. Well, he was dubbed Captain Hindsight and Captain Snoozerfest by Boris Johnson, but actually today it was more a case of Captain Cautious as Keir Starmer unveiled a fairly risk-free Labour manifesto in Manchester.
And another thing, because there may be some people here today who say, where's the surprise? Where's the rabbit out of the hat? To which I say, if you want politics as pantomime, I hear Clapton is nice this time of year.
So tonight I'm asking you, what do you make of the manifesto? Will it convince you to vote Labour? Get in touch, leaving a comment for me at gbnews.com/yoursay with your views this evening on that question. Political editor Chris Hope joins me now. He's in the spin room for tonight's debate. Another debate, Chris, I can't keep up. But I know you spoke to Keir Starmer earlier, Chris. Very intrigued to find out what he said to you.
Hi, Camilla. Yeah, welcome to the spin room here for the ITV seven-way debate. We're seeing senior figures from the Tory party, Labour, Angela Rayner for Labour, Penny Mordaunt for the Tory party, Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats, and then the leaders of all the other smaller parties, Nigel Farage, the SNP, Stephen Flynn, the Plaid Cymru and Green Party co-leaders. So they'll be here later, and we'll be bringing you all the best action from the spin room afterwards. But earlier, of course, we're up in Manchester, where I am now for this launch of this manifesto by Sir Keir Starmer. And I was able to asking him some questions at Crewe Alexander Football Club in his battle bus in the car park. I asked him about, do you want to bring down immigration and to what level? He wouldn't give us a figure. I also chucked in a question at the end, which I was surprised about, when he was laughed at last night for saying his dad was a toolmaker and a factory worker. He gave me an answer I wasn't expecting.
Directly address you on that. My dad worked in a factory all his life. He felt people disrespected him.
Oh.
And
that's not happening with the laughing.
I do want to see this through, because it actually hit a nerve last night.
Yeah.
Because he felt that in the usual conversation, when someone says, "What do you do for a living?" Socially, he would say, "I work in a factory," and there'd be a pause where nobody quite knew what to say. And he felt really disrespected. It caused him in his life to withdraw from social engagements. He didn't do it much later in life because it was raw to him that he should be disrespected because he worked in a factory. So when someone laughed last night, my dad would have turned in his grave.
Was that a bit of snobbishness towards your dad, do you think?
I don't know what caused someone to laugh.
No.
But if you're laughing at someone because they work in a factory, then that is the one thing that I think had a massive impact on someone like my dad, the disrespect. And it's in me. You can see I'm angry about it.
You are
I'm
angry.
frustrated because I will never allow that sort of disrespect for working people to be any part of my plans, any part of the Britain that I want as the future. So I will proudly tell anybody who will listen that my dad worked in a factory. He was a tool maker, very good tool maker. He loved his trade. My mum was a nurse, and she loved being a nurse, and we didn't have a lot of money. And I'm proud of what my parents did. And yes, I don't like it when people laugh at my dad because he worked in a factory.
That's Sir Keir Starmer talking to me for GB News in Crewe Alexander Football Club car park on his battle bus. I thought that was quite an interesting answer there, Camilla. I think the audience were chuckling because of the familiarity with him saying his dad was a toolmaker, factory worker. We saw the same, didn't we, during the one of these other campaigns we've followed together, Camilla, when Jeremy Hunt said he's an entrepreneur, and so it goes on. We often see these things being said, don't we?
Can I say, Chris, he's completely missed the joke. He's completely missed the joke. The joke is not about his father working in a factory or being a toolmaker. I think people watching and listening to this have got huge respect for people who make things in this country, right? The joke is about him weaponising it and giving us this narrative that, you know, he was sort of born in a cardboard box in the middle of the street. We've also laughed, haven't we, at the repeated references by Rishi Sunak to his dad being a GP and his mum being a pharmacist. This is about election campaign bingo. It's not about poking fun at Mr. Starmer Senior, is it?
Well, it's not. I don't think. I know it's not for us. I know that. But for him, he just takes it very personally. I mean, whatever we think about it, he takes it personally himself. And that, I think you've got to respect that a bit, because he says he's seen his father shrink away socially when he said he worked in a factory. He was obviously, people looked down on him as somebody who worked in a factory, and he felt that he was always on the back foot. So he is deeply proud of his dad, and it was a complex relationship. But I think you're right, by the way. I think that that's what's probably why people were laughing last night on Sky News. But that doesn't really matter. He's offended by it, and he's made very clear why on GB News.
Yeah, Chris, before I bring Trevor Kavanagh, the associate editor of The Sun, into the conversation, tell me, what was the atmosphere like in Manchester? Because I was with you at Silverstone for the Tory Manifesto launch. Yes. It was all a bit flat. I think that Silverstone, on reflection, was the wrong metaphor. They were at the cooperative headquarters in Manchester. What was the general vibe like, Chris?
Yeah, it was a cavernous office block with an atrium and many floors going upwards, draped with Labour and the word change. Of course, the party isn't offering much change, more of the same, but not the chaos of the Tory government in recent years. That's the point. And they had some very interesting, I think, interventions from a guy who's got cancer who may not live to see the end of this Labour government, he said, and also from other people who want to see a Labour government. I think they got the tone exactly right. It wasn't too celebratory, it was professional, it was different, and it was upbeat. And I didn't get that in Silverstone. Just while I'm here though, Camilla, can I show you around the spin room? You may want to see.
Please do.
You want to look around the spin room with me?
Very quickly, Chris, because I'm desperate to speak to Trevor.
And very quick, so you'll see that it's quite a becalmed spin room. Excuse me, I'm going to walk past this way. I'm walking past some colleagues here who are sitting on these chairs, but this is where all the journalists work later. You'll see this way, you'll see all the chairs there. These will be filled up with people as they watch this 7-way spin room. And at the back wall there, you see the other broadcasters from Sky and the BBC.
Good man.
And I think ITN are probably there as well. So
you're going to be bringing us a Labour big
not
beast.
Quite yet.
No, you're going to be bringing us a Labour big beast, hopefully by the end of the show, Chris. So we look forward to that. Thank you.
Definitely. Guarantee it. Guarantee it.
Guarantee it. You see, you've got his promise there. We'll hold you to that, Chris Hope. Thank you very much. Well, as I say, The Sun's associate editor, former political editor, Trevor Kavanagh, joins me now. Trevor, let's just go through some of the highlights just so that people can catch up, because I appreciate not everybody's drilled into the manifesto. There's not that much in there that we didn't know already. It's a bit like a repeat of the Tory manifesto where nothing's much of a surprise, to be honest. Votes for 16-year-olds. No increase to VAT, income tax or national insurance, although the thresholds are still frozen, and 8.6 billion in tax rises have been identified with regard to charging people extra for their school fees. Non-DOMs and overseas property investors look to be being taxed more. Scrapping of the hereditary lords, have lords retire at 80. Build 1.5 million new homes, reduce net migration. We've had the Institute for Fiscal Studies saying, well, you've given us some costings, but only for the final year. So they've sort of suggested it's slightly smoke and mirrors. What's your reaction to it, Trevor?
Well, I think that it raises many more questions than it answers, and quite deliberately so. I think that many of the costings of the plans for their spending certainly aren't spelled out. And the tax increases they are prepared to admit to are not going to cover the bills that they're inevitably going to face. But there is a lot more in that manifesto which has been left unspoken about, and certainly not raised in questions to the Leader of the Opposition, not least of which is the plan to completely transform our system of democracy under Gordon Brown's renewal of democracy plan, which has been sitting there more or less unexamined for the last 2 years.
And this is all spelt out in the manifesto, because I know that on The Telegraph we've written stories today about them launching 14 different reviews. We've heard from Miriam Cates of the Tories basically saying that buried in the heart of this document is this plan to basically sort of destroy our constitution. She's made the point in this piece that she's written, very hard-hitting piece, that there won't be anything left for the Conservatives to conserve. Is that what you're speaking to as well?
Well, I think it's worse than that. I think that the whole point of this is to destroy the Conservatives as a political party, as an opposition party, forever, which is, of course, what Nye Bevan spelled out in 1945 when the Attlee government was elected, and he said, our purpose is to destroy the Conservative Party. Well, if we get the landslide that Keir Starmer is expected to get, this turns it into an elective dictatorship, which would enable them to actually do anything they pleased. And one of the things they have no intention of doing is losing the next election to the Tories, or perhaps any further future elections.
But are you talking about the votes for 16 and 17-year-olds, which could guarantee Labour being in power for a lot longer, or are you talking about something bigger than that? Because you're saying dictatorship. Obviously, if they're democratically elected and they get that much of a landslide and actually the Tories completely implode, which some people might say is their own damn fault, frankly, then they're entitled to be in power for as long as the public want them to be in power, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, an elective democracy, an elective dictatorship is a democratic act. But what we're seeing, first of all, the votes at 16 is, I think, a distortion of democracy. I think that there are good reasons why 16-year-olds who are children are not allowed to drink or smoke or get married, and many other things, including, even though they're allowed to join the armed forces, they're not allowed to carry a gun into battle. And that's there to protect them. And I think that's to protect them from decisions that they might regret later. The point about that is just the start. This will, Graham Stringer, a Labour MP, has warned against this and says that it's going to be seen as a deliberate gerrymandering of the vote to suit the Labour Party because they're likely to be Labour supporters. But I think that there are other things that the Labour Party in office would be prepared to consider, including votes for European citizens, which is about 6 million extra votes, probably going towards Labour. And who knows, proportional PR if necessary.
I mean, that wouldn't be in Labour's favour, though, would it? If they've got the stonking majority.
If they were in danger,
they won't want to let Reform have any more power in Parliament, will they?
Well, a PR would not be a good thing for any major party in power. But if in desperation, what I'm saying is, they're, I think, intending to change the way we are governed in this country in a way which would enable them to retain power almost indefinitely.
And when you're talking about that being a continuation of Brownism, are you talking about this kind of devolution of parliamentary and political power to quangos and arm's-length bodies and this sort of thing, so that it means that actually the people we actually elect don't seem to have much control over anything anymore? Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. We saw Gordon Brown in power doing all of those things, and we saw him stuffing the quangos, the charities, the public sector with Labour appointees. His document that he tabled about 2 years ago goes much, much further. It effectively strips Parliament of its elective powers as the seat of democracy and redistributes them to councils, local authorities, devolved bodies, Scotland and Wales, and takes them away from those who are accountable to the direct voting of electors. And that in the end means that and also those would be bound in law, and the people who would decide on any legal challenge would be the Supreme Court, which of course is a Labour body.
I mean, this is a continuation, just a kind of slight brief history lesson. Under Blair and Brown, obviously, we saw the Bank of England being given independence. We saw the establishment a bit later, actually, to be fair, under Osborne, the Office for Budget Responsibility, which the likes of Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss say have too much power over deciding what should be in a budget, rather than just reacting to a budget. So you're talking about an extension of that, Trevor. When we look at the kind of left and right of it all, in a way, this is a kind of all things to all men and women manifesto that might keep neither happy. Should we just have a look at that moment where he gets heckled on stage, clearly by a Corbynista who would be further on the left of the party, who basically thinks he's a Tory in red clothing? Let's just have a look at that.
Taken together, isn't this clear evidence of a changed Labour Party and clear evidence of the change we need for our country? A changed... Thank you very much. Yeah. We gave up on being a party of protest 5 years ago. We want to be a party of power.
I mean, if you couldn't hear that clearly, she's basically saying that this is a Tory manifesto. She feels he's abandoned the pledges he made when he stood for the leadership in 2020. And let's be honest, that leadership video was, you know, slightly Ken Loach-ish. It was pretty Corbynistic. But this is clever politics from him, isn't it? Because this idea of don't vote for Labour, there's too much jeopardy, he's trying to extinguish with claims that he's the party of wealth creation now, that he is a moderate, that he's abandoned those Corbyn principles.
I don't think the woman protester was listening very carefully, because what you heard at the end of that was the whole point of what Keir Starmer's after, and any politician would be too, so you can't blame him, which is we are a party of power. And so I think he's concealing his hand all the way through this about what will happen once they are in power. He doesn't want to talk about the future, what the big plans are for how they will actually levy the sort of taxes that he hasn't yet admitted to. He's admitted that he won't increase certain taxes, but there are plenty of other tax revenue streams which he could tap and increase. And that's part of the renewal system. It's not just renewal of the political system, the voting electoral system. It's a renewal of the economy. So a great deal of the decision-making about the direction of the economy will also be devolved to this new economic banking system that he's going to create.
Finally, Trevor, I mean, you've been around for a long, long time, been around politics for a long, long time. Do you think these projections of Tory annihilation and massive Labour landslide, bigger than 1997, are on the money?
Yes, I'm afraid they are. And I think that voters are cutting off their nose to spite their face because of 14 years of Tory misrule. They're taking a leap in the dark while at the same time signing a blank cheque. And one day they'll wake up and see what they've done.
All right, Trevor Kavanagh, Associate Editor of The Sun, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. We're going to be speaking more about the detail of the manifesto next, including whether Labour has become the party of the motorist. See you in 2.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m, followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain, followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Plenty of mixers, plenty of lovely gin.
Yes.
What have you got here for us? Just explain what you've brought in.
So today I'm going to be presenting the Cotswolds Dry Gin and the Cotswolds Wildflower Gin.
Ooh.
So the first one that was introduced into our market was the Cotswolds Dry Gin. Now we have 9 different types of botanicals. We introduce into our pot still. We introduce obviously juniper berries because it's a London dry. Angelica roots and coriander seeds, giving it that little limey flavour. Also, cardamom seeds, then black peppercorn, giving it a little spice.
Ooh.
And then the part that is more interesting that regards to the pouring, we have the grapefruit peel and the lime peel. We're going to start with the Cotswolds Dry, okay? So the first one introduced.
So Ellie was taking the mick out of me this morning because I said my favourite gin was, what is it, pink lemonade?
You like a pink gin and lemonade, yes.
You called me, I'm going to say what you said. You said that's a bit girly.
As you see, it turned into cloudy. Those are the oils of the spices because we don't filter it. Our gin is completely unfiltered.
Got it.
I love this. It's 11:52. It's never too early. Cheers.
Cheers.
And would you have any, this sounds very juvenile, would you have any snacks with gin? Or does it ruin it?
Olives.
Ah, you can tell your culture.
It depends on how you're drinking it and where you are, like what you're actually going to do with it. Yeah. But you can have pretty much all sorts. As long as it stays on the salty side, that's what I would go for personally.
A salty snack.
Yeah, that's what I would go for.
So olives, would you say, is that a good choice? Or crisps, nuts?
They're quite salty olives, aren't they?
It depends on your taste, really. Like personally, I wouldn't go for it, but I have seen. And the culture behind gin is drastically increased over the years. The flavours are all different.
That's really good.
Exactly. You see what I mean?
Oh, very nice.
Like that zesty, floral kind of flavour coming through. They're absolutely stunning, aren't they?
The People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Vote 2024. The people decide with me, Camilla Tominey. Now, earlier I asked you what you made of the Labour manifesto. This is what you said. Helen says Labour's manifesto is like a paper bag full of, oh, look, nothing. Rob, Labour will clearly make a big mess and then blame everyone, but mainly the previous government. I think we can be assured of that. Steve, Labour's manifesto will not be adhered to. Starmer and Reeves know full well that their fully costed, fully funded manifesto is based on unprovable, wild financial guesses and the money just won't be there. That's actually quite a good point. Let's see if I can discuss that now with Harry Quilter-Pinner, Director of Policy and Politics at the Institute for Public Policy Research. There is something in that, Harry, because I note that the IFS, Paul Johnson, today has said that they've only costed for the very end of their proposed parliament and not all of it. You're happy with the manifesto in general because it's recommended, it's put in some of your own recommendations, your own body's recommendations, is that right?
I think, look, the manifesto includes a bunch of things that I think broadly are going in the right direction for the country.
Go on, name them quickly.
So they are proposing to put up a select group of taxes, mainly on people with the broadest shoulders, to put that money into public services. And the polling shows that's what the public want. It's what the public services need. The comment that you've just seen there, I think, is pointing to a specific challenge, which is that even with a rising tax burden, which all the parties are committing to, all the parties show a growth in GDP, taxes as a proportion of GDP, that we will still have a gap for what is needed for public services going forward.
Because there's not enough money and they've got big spending pledges and they're going to stick to the Tories' borrowing rules and they don't want to reintroduce austerity. So they're a little bit stuck between a rock and a hard place.
So what they've said is they will put some more money in public services with those tax rises, those very targeted tax rises.
So
There's
that's
still a gap.
Private school fee-paying parents. It's at people who have got overseas property and it's non-DOMs.
Yeah, and energy companies.
And energy companies, thank you.
But there's still a gap. And so the challenge for any incoming government post July the 4th is, can you get growth up so you have more tax revenue to fill that gap?
Yeah.
Can you make public services more efficient? Can we prevent people getting ill so they don't need to go to the NHS, for example? And if they can't, then the challenge is, do they borrow more than they think? Do they tax more than they think? And at the moment, what Labour have been very clear on is they will not tax working people. So they've said they won't put up income tax, they won't put up national insurance, they won't put up VAT.
But they haven't ruled out taxing people that employ people. And I say that because there's something slightly oxymoronic, isn't there, at the heart of Keir Starmer saying that this is a manifesto for wealth and to promote wealth creation, and yet being quite ambivalent on how much the wealthy themselves are going to be taxed. Because the capitalist argument will be that it's the wealthy that promotes wealth creation by employing people, making money, giving them pay rises.
Yeah, and of course that's why, IPR has been championing, for example, more investment in this country. We're one of the lowest investors in the G7. Investment is like the fuel in the petrol tank. If we don't invest, we won't get growth. It's why we've been pushing for an industrial policy, which Labour have also been talking about, to try and create jobs across the country. So there's lots in there that's about trying to get growth.
But it might put off investors, mightn't it? If he's talking about wealth taxes later down the line and people with second homes and all this kind of stuff, implying that it's going to affect people who have the cash to bring into the UK, right?
So to be clear, Keir Starmer has not said he'll tax wealth down the line, but I think the point is...
No, you're saying that the broadest shoulders should carry the burden and therefore that inevitably probably will result in wealthy people being taxed more.
Well, so far they've targeted energy companies, they've targeted people with a non-dom status.
Yes.
But I think the point here is the thing that's been discouraging investment in this country is the instability we've seen in recent years. It's made it very hard for companies to want to invest. It is, are we setting up the right conditions to compete in the industries of the future? So the transition to net zero, life sciences, technology. And what we've been advocating for IPR is more investment, the state putting in more, but asking business to put in more alongside that.
But aren't businesses also asking for deregulation, and there's not much of that in the manifesto?
I personally don't think businesses are asking for lots and lots of deregulation. That's not what we hear when we talk to business. What we hear is we need stability, we need a state that will create the conditions where business can crowd in and dominate in the new sectors that are going to create jobs in the future.
All right, thank you, Harry. Let's speak about cars now and speak about whether Labour, as it is claimed, has now become the party of the driver. Let's do that with Steve Huntingford, who's editor of What Car? Steve, are you convinced? They want to repair 1 million potholes. They've pledged that much, although they are the party that supports both ULEZ and LTNs.
It's obviously good to be able to spend more on fixing potholes. It is a major problem, I think, that anyone in the country who drives will attest to. The trouble is, obviously, the amount that's been pledged. Obviously, we'll be talking about 1.5 billion for various motoring issues. And well, the last estimate about how much it would cost to fix all the potholes in the UK was 16 billion. So we're not even close. No.
16 billion quid?
Indeed, that is the state that our roads are in, sadly.
Right, OK, so that's a mountain they might not be able to climb. What's the latest on fuel duty? Because there had been hints in the run-up to the manifesto that he was thinking about unfreezing it. Is there anything on fuel duty at this stage?
So again, it's all only hints at this stage. That is the potentially something that will be done. Obviously, there's talk about bringing the electric car, basically the ban on petrol cars forward again to 2030.
Well, what impact might that have on the motorists? So
potentially to fund the thing, so to help fund that, that potentially why the fuel duty may come in. So obviously, the problem there is at the moment we're not ready for that yet. About 2/3 of the people in the UK at the moment could drive an electric car right now, and it would suit them very well. Which is far more than people that actually buy them. It's at about 16.5% last year. At the moment, though, it's very much weighted towards fleet markets because that's where the incentives are in the tax system. So to get people up to a private motorist driving them, one, it's a change of attitude, because actually, as I say, far more people could drive them than they could, but then it's how you help the people who can't, who wouldn't suit at the moment. And the reason why they wouldn't suit them is because about 30% of people in the UK don't have off-street parking. No. And so that means they can't charge at home overnight, which means they are forced to rely on the public charging network. So that's where we potentially need their money.
Well, also the cars don't have the range, all of them, and equally there aren't enough charging points.
So indeed, so the charging point for the current government, the charging point target for the current government was to have 300,000 in the UK by 2030. We're currently at about 75,000, so we do have a long way to go on that. So that is potentially where, if the fuel duty went up, that money could be invested in that to help with that, because we're not currently putting them in fast enough to hit that target.
Fair enough, but I think Labour are saying something about car insurance, which a lot of drivers have seen shoot up, particularly older drivers. This has been a phenomenon, hasn't it, Steve? The idea of older drivers suddenly finding that their bills, seemingly overnight, have had a zero added to them.
Indeed, I think with car insurance, it's always... The rules have changed to make it actually harder for car insurance companies, but there was always that thing in the past where if you stayed with your insurance company, the price you paid escalated over time. And that has now been made legal, so you can't do that. But inevitably, if the costs are going up, the costs of actually the particularly materials, things like that, have gone up recently in general inflation, that inevitably pushes up the price. The other thing is with electric cars, because of there's been a big rise in the price of electric cars, and that's not really because they're any more difficult to fix. In many ways, they're simpler than petrol and diesel cars. The issue with them is that potentially there's not enough people at the moment who are able to work on them because of the technology that's in them, because you don't want to be electrocuted. You do have to have special training to work on them. And so we do need to train up more people who can help service those cars.
Steve, I must ask you before you go, what does the editor of What Car drive?
I currently run a BMW i5.
An i5, so that's electric?
It's electric.
Love that. Steve, Harry, thank you very much indeed. Coming up next, I'm going to be speaking to former Brexit Secretary David Davis. Don't go anywhere.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow, well, there'll be some sunshine, but be prepared for some heavy showers and gusty winds at times as well. We've seen some blustery conditions today across the west from this area of low pressure. It's been bringing in these weather fronts which have been bringing in outbreaks of rain, spreading steadily now to northern Scotland and across eastern England. It will turn a little drier through the night, that rain tending to move away from much of Wales, the Midlands and southern England. A few showers will follow in behind. The wind's easing a touch, but still quite breezy. And a very mild night, not really for the time of year, but certainly compared to most nights of late. Temperatures holding up in double figures. So it won't be as chilly first thing tomorrow morning. There'll be some sunshine over the Midlands and parts of eastern England, but still quite breezy along the south coast. And it won't take long before the showers get going. Certainly, of course, Wales expects some showers through the early part of the morning, coming into western Scotland, northwest England. Parts of Northern Ireland may start dry. A different start to the day here compared to today. But across northern Scotland, a very different day here, because after a largely fine day today, there's going to be much more cloud, rain and a fairly brisk wind, and that may stick around across the far north of Scotland for most of the day. Elsewhere, we'll be chasing the showers through. There will be some sunshine, but the downpours will never be too far away. All areas having that kind of really changeable day. 1 minute it's fine, 10 minutes later it's chucking it down with rain. The showers zipping through on a fairly brisk breeze. And when the sun's out, well, it will feel a little warmer than it has done for most of this week. Temperatures still below average for the time of year, but a little bit higher than many days this week. It's showery right through the weekend. Yes, again on Saturday, some sunshine, but some heavy thundery showers likely over central and eastern parts, some slow-moving downpours further north as well. And it stays blustery in places with further sunshine and showers on Sunday. Goodbye.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes, she could have saved Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done. Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Vote 2024 with me, Camilla Tominey. I'm delighted to say that Sir David Davis, the former Brexit Secretary, joins me now from the big debate, where presumably he's going into bat for Penny Mordaunt, who, David, you supported as a leader. Would this campaign be going better if Penny Mordaunt was in charge of the Tory party, David?
No, I don't think so. I think the campaign's going to be about substance. It's actually, I mean, this week, 2 manifestos in 1 week, the week of 2 manifestos. 3, actually. I forgot the Liberals. And it's going to be about substance. It's going to be about taxes, about spending, about health service, about all the things that matter to people individually.
Do you recognise, I don't know if you heard it earlier, but Trevor Kavanagh, who you're familiar with, I know, the Sun's associate editor, was accusing Labour of kind of performing this continuation of Brownism, with the manifesto containing quite a lot about trying to devolve power from Parliament and from politicians into arm's-length bodies and quangos. Miriam Cates has also written about this for The Telegraph, saying that the Labour Party are now out to destroy the Constitution. Is that language and rhetoric you recognise?
Yeah, I think they've got a point. I mean, Labour are doing a lot of things to try and embed. I mean, if they win, they're going to try and embed themselves in power, and that ranges from votes for 16-year-olds, because they think more 16-year-olds will vote for them, through, as you say, arm's-length bodies. Well, you know, where they will install their own people. But you know, if you want a demonstration of how arm's-length bodies work, look at the post office. That's what an arm's-length body is, you know, and I can name you a few others as well, where we've had injustices by the state and not cleared up because they're not actually directly accountable to Parliament. What I want to see is Parliament stronger, not weaker, and I'm afraid that's not what Labour offers.
Having said that, David, I mean, the latest polling is again dire. Rishi Sunak's approval rating continues to tank. We've now got this situation where it's looking highly probable that reform will overtake the Tories next week. And we've got this prospect, really, of Labour being handed a supermajority on a plate on the back of a manifesto which the Tories are claiming are flimsy. So, I mean, this is more a case of the Tories sort of deserving this because of 14 years of failure, isn't it?
No, I mean, first off, you know, you've had 14 years in which you've had quite a few once-in-a-generation events, ranging from the financial crash through the pandemic, through a first war in Europe in a generation, all of which had to be paid for or dealt with in some way. So, of course, and you know, my public, when I talk to people on the street, they understand that. They're cross about some things, of course they are, but they also understand that this has been a difficult time to steer through. So that's the first thing. But the other thing is, people focus on what matters to them, you know, and only 2 days ago, I was a lady called Heidi. She just retired, and she said to me, "I was thinking of voting reform, and then I realised that actually that would mean I would help Labour into power, give them a bigger majority if they're in, and that will put at risk my pension and my taxes. My taxes will go up." People are beginning to understand that of their own accord before we even say it to them. And of course, she's right. Today's manifesto, I mean, you know, you got the BBC saying it's a tax-raising manifesto. You got the IFS saying it's a tax-raising manifesto. You've even got the Resolution Foundation, of left-wing Resolution Foundation, saying it's a tax-raising manifesto. And against that, we're going to cut taxes. So I think people will understand that.
But isn't Nigel Farage right, and isn't the polling right and the pollsters to say that this is already over? I mean, the Labour Party are so far ahead. As I say, the polls are suggesting that Rishi Sunak isn't gaining any ground at all, despite everything that you've announced, despite a manifesto he says is full of ideas. So, you know, you were in Last Chance Saloon with the manifesto launch at Silverstone. It was meant to be a sort of Formula One manifesto launch, but actually it's just hit the buffers. Yeah. It's not moving the dial at all.
No, I don't. No, I don't think so at all. I mean, look, this is my 11th election campaign. In every single one, the polls are out by anything between 6 and 20%. What you don't know is which direction they're going to be out in. That's the range. Oh yeah, you don't. And I mean, Nigel Farage and I, you know, we had a conversation on the day of the Brexit referendum at 10 o'clock, 1 minute after the polls had closed. And you know what he said to me? He said, "Oh, we've lost, David." And I said, "No, we haven't. I just put a bet on us winning." So you know, it's not as clear cut. And he is not, you know, he's no oracle. He's a very clever populist orator, but he's no oracle. And you know, what he is saying to the public is there's no difference between Labour and Tories. Well, I'm afraid that's not true on the one hand, and my public understand that it's not true, and they are afraid of the Labour alternative, and they fear that he'll make it more likely, and if they get in, more powerful. And that's a disastrous thing for Britain.
Yes, no question, David. Just a one-word answer, please. Would you work with Farage to unite the right in the future?
No.
OK.
If he's trying to destroy the Tory party, why would I? No.
No, fair enough. So, David Davis, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Lovely to speak to you. Well, England face Serbia on Sunday for Gareth Southgate's first match of the tournament in Germany. The game has been deemed high risk by German authorities as they fear 500 Serbian hooligans are among the supporters. But with England favourites, can they win the battles on the pitch? I can think of no one better to talk to than Sam Allardyce, former England and Premier League manager. Sam, lovely to see you this evening. Thank you so much for joining me. Can I talk to you about Gareth Southgate's selection, please? Would you have taken Grealish, Maddison, Rashford or even Sterling, who have been left out of the squad?
I would have definitely taken Grealish, definitely, without a doubt. I think that his talent at every level, and particularly international level, in terms of holding the ball, never rushed, always in control. There is a slight doubt about his goal scoring. There's lots of other players in the England side, like Palmer, Foden, that have scored, you know, twice, three times more goals than Jack Grealish this season. So they've probably got the nod instead of Jack, you know. And I think that, you know, even Bellingham has lumped up 16, 20 goals at Real Madrid. So we're very good at scoring goals now. So perhaps that's the reason, because Jack's goal-scoring record isn't as good as theirs. He's been left out.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? Because there's also a bit of a disruptor and somebody who can bring out late. Do you think that Southgate deserves to be manager still? I mean, many people will say that the team we had at the last Euro should have beaten Italy.
Yes, I do. I think that he deserves this chance to try and take them all over the threshold into the final and win it this time. I think that there's many factors that he has to face. I think the first thing that he's better for now is the huge experience he now has and his backroom staff. You have to bear in mind that when he first started, he was very naive as a manager, rarely had managed, only at Middlesbrough. So all that knowledge and all that experience he's gained with his staff now should stand, I hope, fingers crossed, England in good stead. And certainly there's quite a few young players in there that are a surprise, but certainly the players that have got the experience of last Euros and the World Cup should really have the mentality to take us all the way. And I think that's very, very important, to show the steel and determination, not just the ability that you've got to get all the way and get through to the final and win it this time. Gareth's problem, not a problem. Gareth's knowledge and Gareth's experience now should be about who are we playing, how do we play against them, and how do we play to win. And he needs to change his tactics. He needs to do very well in his substitutions, because you've got 5 subs this time round. And that will be the killing edge on whether you win or lose a game, in my opinion.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Sam Allardyce. It sounds like you think that it may be coming home. We keep our fingers and toes crossed.
Let's hope so that song is not wasted on us again this time round.
No.
You know, I think that we are all looking forward to it. There is a huge pressure on the manager and the players, and I hope they can handle that pressure and deliver.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Sam Allardyce, for joining us this evening. And of course, we wish the England team well on Sunday. Coming up next, Lisa Nandy is going to be speaking to Chris Hope from that spin room. Don't go anywhere.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, a 23-year-old plus-size model called Sarah Milliken has been crowned Miss Alabama in 2024. Marvellous. After a huge win in the national pageant, the beauty queen has been subject to mass online trolling where haters have branded her an unhealthy embarrassment. That's one of the nicer things people have been saying, by the way. Look, you can see pictures of her there. Is this idolising obese models? Is it empowering or is it dangerous, given the obesity crisis we are facing, not just in this country, but all over the world?
This young woman is very, very overweight. And I think anything that makes obesity acceptable because of its health issues, we ought to be regarding it in the same way as we regarded smoking. And we know the figures out last week about the incidences of cancer in young people from processed food, ultra-processed food. We know obesity is costing the NHS and therefore us absolute fortunes. And we know that it leads to all sorts of other problems. So I think we have to get the balance right. Yes, be body confident. Nobody needs to be a stick insect. But let's not celebrate unhealthiness.
You know, she's a lovely young lady. I mean, she's very confident in her body, which is a good thing. However, it's that fine line when we have children going to school who are already obese in this country. How do we draw that line between?
Look, there is no place for hate, I think, in the wider society. I know that's probably an obvious thing to say, but the amount of abuse that this young girl might have had as a child for being overweight and for being constantly overweight, I think if that is a way in which she has a platform to say, I am who I am, then I think that is fine. But you're right.
The People's Channel.
Experience the extraordinary. Book a trip to Atlantis the Palm in Dubai. Dine at Michelin star and celebrity chef restaurants. Be pampered. Or be thrilled with daily access to Aquaventure Water Park included. Experience a world away.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Our political editor, Chris Hope, is in the spin room with Lisa Nandy, the Shadow International Development Secretary. Chris.
Camilla, that's right. I'm joined by Lisa Nandy, a Shadow Cabinet Minister. Lisa, thank you for joining us here at GB News. The reaction is in now to your manifesto. Do you worry, though, that you've tied yourselves in so many a straitjacket of fiscal discipline that if the economy doesn't grow, you can't find any growth, you're in trouble as a party and your plans are in jeopardy if you win power?
No, not at all, because growth runs through the document, through its 128 pages, like a silver thread. You can see it on every page and in every policy. But I make no apology for the fact that we're being careful. It's people's money. They haven't got a lot of it after 14 years of Tory government. So everything in it is carefully costed, fully funded. We know that we can deliver it. And at a time when trust in politics and politicians is at an all-time low, that is probably the single biggest thing that we could have gifted to the country right now. It's change, but it's change that you can believe in.
In terms of tax cuts, if they're going to happen for working people, what is a working person for Labour? Is that anyone who's working, or is it on a certain income or with a family?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of people in this country who are working, currently not earning very much and finding it hard to make ends meet. But we believe that if you work hard, you should be able to get on in life and it shouldn't get harder and harder, and you should be able to hand on a better situation to your children than the one that you had. And for many working people in this country, that contract has been fundamentally broken. That's why when you look at the policies that we're setting out today, whether it's building 1.5 million homes or whether it's extending breakfast clubs into every school, This is about two things. It's about growing our economy, and it's about making life easier for people who are currently working harder than I can ever remember in my lifetime, but finding that they can't make ends meet at the end of the week.
You're also asking GB News viewers to trust Labour after the Corbyn years and after your leader didn't even support Jeremy Corbyn, really, when he was in his shadow cabinet, said he didn't think he'd win. In your manifesto, there's only 1 year of spending, not 4 or 5 years like you have with the Tories. Why is that?
Well, because we have set out that we want to achieve the highest sustained growth in the G7. We won't be able to do everything overnight. So the measures that we're proposing in the manifesto are about turning the country around and pointing us in the right direction, whether it's bringing down NHS waiting lists or getting more teachers into schools or getting Britain building again through planning reform. This is about taking Britain on a journey, setting us on the right path, showing what can be achieved, starting on day one of a Labour government, and the end destination is the highest sustained growth in the G7 and a Labour government that's able to look people in the eye in 5 years' time and say, we said we would rebuild this country, we said you would feel better off. After 14 years of Conservative government, I think most people in this country can't say that they feel better off. After 5 years of Labour, it's our ambition that they do.
Are you happy there's no figure on migration? You want to cut net migration, but no figure, no tens of thousands?
I don't think people believe politicians talking about figures on migration, because the Conservatives have set a target every single year that they've been in government, and they've broken every single promise to keep it. And what we've seen since is that we've seen record numbers of small boat crossings. We've seen only 1% of asylum applications that were made last year even processed, huge asylum backlogs springing up. That's why we've said a border command force will be our absolute number one priority. There are 6 top pledges in this election campaign, and that is one of them. We'll get the asylum backlog going. And crucially, in my area of development, what that means is instead of spending a third of the aid budget on dealing with putting up asylum seekers in hotels here in the UK while they languish on waiting lists for years and years, instead we'll deal with the root causes of why so many people are on the move in the first place.
You saw Sir Keir Starmer's interview with GB News, with me for GB News earlier today, didn't you? He took it very seriously when audience laughed at him when he said he was the son of a toolmaker who worked in a factory. Was he not getting the joke, or do you understand why he was upset?
I think the interview you did with Keir was incredibly moving, because he's talked to me before about his dad. I know how much his family meant to him and still means to him. And what he talked to you about how his dad always felt shamed and how he felt judged all his life, I thought was an incredibly empathetic moment. I think many people actually thinking about their own parents would understand that sentiment. And I think it was genuinely moving to hear him open up and connect with you, and therefore with GB News viewers, about what is possibly quite a typical experience.
He certainly felt it, didn't he? But maybe do you think people who mock him are being cruel, unfair? Because it's his personal story.
I think it was a reminder that politicians at heart, whichever political party we come from, most of us are very ordinary people. We have our lives, we have our families, we care deeply. We come into politics because we're trying to do the right thing. We make mistakes, we're all human. But I think what you saw very much was the human side of Keir Starmer in that interview with GB News. And I think a lot of your viewers will feel as moved as I did to hear him talk about his dad in such moving terms.
Well, Lisa Nandy, thank you for joining us tonight on GB News with that chat about Keir Starmer. And back to you, Camilla.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I know you're going to be there in the spin room all night for GB News, reporting back, including to Tom Harwood, who is presenting State of the Nation tonight. What else have you got coming up, Tom?
Goodness me, I have spent the day diving into this Labour manifesto, and I'll tell you what, there are some things that haven't really seen the light of day. The constitutional reform of the Labour Party, not just about voting age, but what Parliament looks like, how Parliament acts, indeed, how there's going to be a new commission looking at all of the working practices and the traditions of our Parliament. We'll look at that in great detail.
Very much looking forward to it. Love your deep diving into the detail here, Tom. I'll be back on Sunday because I'm presenting my Sunday morning politics show at 9:30. I'll then be back after that next week at 7. State of the Nation's next, but up next first is Alex Deakin with that weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow, well, there'll be some sunshine, but be prepared for some heavy showers and gusty winds at times as well. We've seen some blustery conditions today across the west from this area of low pressure. It's been bringing in these weather fronts which have been bringing in outbreaks of rain, spreading steadily now to northern Scotland and across eastern England. It will turn a little drier through the night, that rain tending to move away from much of Wales, the Midlands and southern England. A few showers will follow in behind. The wind's easing a touch, but still quite breezy. And a very mild night, not really for the time of year, but certainly compared to most nights of late. Temperatures holding up in double figures. So it won't be as chilly first thing tomorrow morning. There'll be some sunshine over the Midlands and parts of eastern England, but still quite breezy along the south coast. And it won't take long before the showers get going. Certainly, of course, Wales expects some showers through the early part of the morning, coming into western Scotland, northwest England. Parts of Northern Ireland may start dry. A different start to the day here compared to today. But across northern Scotland, a very different day here, because after a largely fine day today, there's going to be much more cloud, rain and a fairly brisk wind, and that may stick around across the far north of Scotland for most of the day. Elsewhere, we'll be chasing the showers through. There will be some sunshine, but the downpours will never be too far away. All areas having that kind of really changeable day. 1 minute it's fine, 10 minutes later it's chucking it down with rain. The showers zipping through on a fairly brisk breeze. And when the sun's out, well, it will feel a little warmer than it has done for most of this week. Temperatures still below average for the time of year, but a little bit higher than many days this week. It's showery right through the weekend. Yes, again on Saturday, some sunshine, but some heavy thundery showers likely over central